It imprinted itself on your mind. I mean, pictures are really worth 1,000 words, and for me, they're definitely worth 1,000 words because they're a hell of a lot prettier than words are, and consequently, you know, I remember all this stuff. You know, I remember all the names of all the planets. You know, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, which is no longer a planet apparently, and. And then you got the Oort cloud, and you got the asteroid belt, and you got all the various moons of Mars, Phobos and Deimos, and all that kind of stuff. I remember all that stuff when I was little. I had nobody to talk about it with. I'd sit there looking at Encyclopedia Britannicas, which are not particularly interesting because they only have tiny little grey pictures, whereas these magazines, they had great big colourful pictures. And it would explain things in proper words and not great long words that you couldn't understand. Mm-hmm. So it made all the difference. And if they had magazines around, like maybe they do, but it could make a lot of difference to the way kids get more enthusiastic about science. Because science is a very exciting thing. Mm-hmm. It's very exciting.
It's so exciting that I'm even still recording you despite the fact the lens is badly fogged up on this camera.
Ah, that could be anybody then.
It's interesting having a dad like that, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. That's why I put him on YouTube sometimes.
Well,
Oh, now you can't think of anything to say.
I can't think of anything to say. I don't know if you remember that one time when we put a pot on the side and it was wet, and the pot was hot, and the pot was sort of concave.
Oh yeah, and it would shimmy across the counter.
And the air got caught underneath between the pot and the counter, and it was wet, so the air couldn't get out. But what it did is it lifted the pot up just enough for it to slide across the moisture, and it started sliding all by itself. And it's the kind of thing that
most people would attribute to a poltergeist,
really
right?
superstitious about. But
oh yeah,
as if you didn't know, you know, the basic principles of science. You go, oh well, it has to be a poltergeist. That's the only reasonable.
Only reasonable conclusion it could possibly be is that it's the undead.
Yeah, in actual fact, it's just a combination of the physical sort of conditions and gravity and that, and you know, to some people that's a bit of a letdown, but to us right. It was a fun thing, and you just realize, yeah, this can actually happen. And then, and once you start to understand the principles of chemistry and physics, then you can see the possibilities of how you can make all kinds of things to your advantage. And you feel like you have some control over it without sort of getting down on your knees and praying to something else for their consideration to, you know, to work magic for you. But, you know, we have a definite tendency to think in terms of magic, which is unfortunate.
Well, you know, I think a lot of that stems from the fact that I don't think people are really very interested in finding out how it works, frankly. I mean, they're interested a little bit, but a lot of people would like the facade of being knowledgeable and wise without actually putting in the work to do it. And that's why you're supposed to respect everybody's opinion because of their fragile little frickin' egos, you know? And it's really frustrating.
Well, I think you have to respect their feelings.
Yeah,
but
yes.
not their opinions.
Well,
necessarily.
the people that I do interact with on a daily basis, like that I have to work with and I interact with, and who, you know, I deal with on a daily basis, I do respect their feelings about it. Mm-hmm. I don't on the internet because, frankly,
you don't have time for that.
You know, when you're judging somebody's opinion on whether to be offended, you really have to judge what that person is to you, too, you know? Like, what are they to you?
Yeah.
And does it really, really matter if they think you're an idiot?
Mm-hmm. Well, if they're going to make a statement and expect to be taken seriously, they should also expect to be criticized.
If you think they're knowledgeable and that their opinion is actually worth paying attention to, then it would affect the way you think. Mm-hmm. And you would take their opinion a lot more seriously and probably be affected by criticism of it. And unless they can give me something worth taking seriously, I have a really hard time taking them seriously in a discussion. Because it's like, I have heard this before, and it sounds to me like you haven't examined the evidence. And if you feel like you want to believe in that, well, okay, then it's good that you're happy. You know what I mean? And I mean that in a positive way. It's good that you're happy, but I can't go there with you. Do you know what I mean? And it kind of sucks. For me anyway, and it probably sucks for them a little too. Well, maybe they don't care that much, I don't know.
I think in the long run they limit themselves because...
That's what I feel like, but if they're happy then that's really the point, right?
Yeah.
But I can't help thinking that in the long run those kind of misconceptions about the world would end up contributing to somebody's... would not end up contributing to somebody's happiness.
Well, there's several ways in which, for instance, science is very inspiring. One of the ways is that whereas religions have a tendency to separate people into groups that only believe in certain things, science is universal, and you can talk to anybody in the world and you can feel a kinship, and also science itself shows how we are so interrelated that it breaks down the barriers between us, and we can all talk the same language, a language that we agree is the best to describe the world as it really is. And we really work hard at making that language as clean and as clear as possible. And those people that are interested in it. And those people then belong to this huge worldwide community that really does have a hell of a lot more power altogether and is more useful to humanity than any of the religions. The religions are very short-term things that make you feel good at the moment. You know, you break down and you pray in emergencies, and then you get back to trying to live in the world the way it really is.
Say you lied to protect somebody's feelings, who there's absolutely no reason that they would need to know whatever it was, because there was the truth would not ever help them feel any better, and it would only hurt them, and it wouldn't affect anything anyway. But if you were the kind of person who felt like something was watching you and it would be terrible if you told a lie, then you would feel more compelled to actually tell the truth, which could, on some occasions, be incredibly detrimental.
Yeah.
On very specific occasions, telling the truth might not always be the best thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a way that's a typical example of being selfish, because you think that going to heaven is more important than helping these other person's feelings.
Yeah, because you think it's going to count badly against you, and that's being really selfish, so you're going to clear your conscience, but you're going to hurt somebody else.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that just absolutely disgusts me is the way that believing all the power in the world belongs to someone else is very alienating, because you feel like a victim, that you are then subject to the will of some other great thing in the world, and that you're not an integrated part of the world, you're just merely put here as a test.
Whereas or as to do somebody else's bidding.
Yeah,
sort of
whereas science tells you that you inevitably have grown out of the world. This is what the world does. It makes people and trees and animals and mountains and other things, and you belong here. This is you're part of the world, and you're part of other people because you're all so similar, and you've all followed the same path, and you all have the same ancestors, and it's incredibly fulfilling to think that you have those connections with other people. Unfortunately, when you're religious, you don't. The only connection you have with other people is through God, and God is whimsical and could be, telling you this or telling you that or something else, and it destroys your understanding of morality, because all you do is follow the rules. You don't, regardless of how you feel, you just follow the rules, and all those things are terribly alienating, and it makes you feel small and weak and could lead to all kinds of mental problems.
But here's the thing, is that there are some people who find it so stressful to make decisions for themselves that, in a way, I mean, I don't live inside their head, so I can't perfectly describe it, but to me it seems gutless, but to them it's an anxiety of basically taking responsibility in a very roundabout way of their own mentality, their own lives, and their own feelings. And so they want God to tell them what to do, but basically they don't want God to tell them what to do. They want generally society to tell them what to do. These are people who are particularly prone to These are people who, if they're not religious, are going to blame any fucked upness they feel on society, societal programming, societal influence, and stuff like that, rather than take charge and just get on with their shit, you know? And the fact is, society does have pressure on you, but
it does.
It does, because we're really a social animal. It's hard to train yourself to say, you know, this person, even though they really want me to do this, might not know what they're talking about, and even if they think that their advice is good, they don't know what I know, so it wouldn't be the best idea for me to do what they say, because for a variety of reasons, you know.
Then if you're dependent on a society in which you and that other person belongs, you could then run the risk of being
alienated,
excommunicated from the society, and of course we have a great fear of being rejected.
It's not black and white like that. There's a big grey area of social exclusion that can be brought. And in fact, that's one of the reasons, to be honest, it's one of the reasons why I don't, particularly on the internet, why I don't give a shit about censoring my opinions. And I'm actually quite blunt, and even in some cases people find it pretty offensive, because I don't want people to think that they have a right to have their opinions taken seriously just because they have an opinion. Alright, let's say somebody has a bumper sticker on the back of their car that says something like white power or something like that. And you'd be sitting behind that in traffic and think to yourself, oh my god, this place is so racist. This town is so racist. But the fact is, it's just one asshole. But the thing is that you assume that this person feels confident enough in their society to put a bumper sticker like that on their car without reprisal. You assume these things, even though the person may be just completely detached. But you assume that there's greater support for something like that. So with me putting a bumper sticker on my car that says "God bless atheism," even though it might not be the most popular opinion, the fact is that it tells people, hey, we're not all Christians, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even if it's just me saying it.
Yeah. If you do put your opinion out, you're usually expected to support it, which is
but religion's different. Religion is completely different. Spirituality.
But we
there's a lot of emotion.
We are expecting them to support it. We question them.
You mean atheists?
Atheists question them because atheists can do that, and also it puts them on the spot, and they need to be put on the spot.
And to be honest, I really do dislike the fact that it feels traumatic for people. If people feel a social pressure to think before they open their mouths, I think it's going to be better for everybody, even if it does make them feel a little uncomfortable.
One of the interesting things is that the most intelligent people can say the most stupid things in defense of some preconceived or indoctrinated ideas that they've grown up with.
That's true, yeah.
And because they've had it repeated to them so many times, they think that this is quite reasonable.
That should always make you suspicious of repetition in religion.
Yeah, well, religion depends heavily on repetition.
But especially the three big religions depend hugely on repetition.
The three...
So you're repeating these things from such an early age that you really have no idea what you're saying.
The three Abrahamic religions are very...
I mean, you get somebody to recite a mantra that they've heard, and you ask them to explain it. I mean, really explain it to somebody who's never heard these concepts, and their explanations sound bizarre.
Well, you use the word mantra in a different way than I understand it.
Well, like a saying.
A mantra is a meaningless noise.
Well, it actually does come across as a meaningless noise.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't
so
actually.
Maybe what you're saying is that in the West, something that's repeated over and over again.
Like Jesus saves. Jesus saves.
To you and me, it does sound like a
Jesus
meaningless
saves.
noise.
It is a meaningless noise, but ask them to explain precisely the details and parameters of what that means.
Yeah.
And the explanation just sounds bizarre.
Yeah. And, well, Daniel Dennett was talking about how important it is to teach religion in school.
Oh, I saw that lecture, yeah.
And how each, a proper representation of each religion should be should be explained to the students in school, because that's the best antidote to religion. Because once you start to realize that there are so many different superstitions out there, and as ridiculous as their religion looks to you, so yours looks to them, and that you are actually in the minority. Regardless of what religion you hold, you're definitely in the minority. And there are more people that believe differently than you do, than what you are. Even if you belong to the biggest religion in the world, you're still the minority. And that should give you pause for thought, because you think, oh well, 2 billion Christians can't be wrong. Well, what about 5 billion non-Christians? Are they wrong?
Oh yeah, the world population just turned like 7 billion this month, didn't it?
Yeah, that was neat.
That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, there's a lot of people, but I think that the internet is a great way to even the playing field. I mean, you took it up very early with your YouTube channel,
Well, yeah, I
and
guess so.
you started to express honest opinions about stuff. But the nice thing is,
Also, it's a hell of a lot cheaper than therapy. It's a really great way to vent stuff. It's awesome. But also, you can use that kind of brain training in real life. When somebody is an idiot, you can just stop and think to yourself, you know what, don't get pissed off, because it's not worth it. They're just, what they're saying says more about them than me sometimes. Do you know what I mean?
well, I'm amazed at how your confidence is built over the years, and I would have sort of thought that it would have been knocked down, considering how much criticism that you've got. But
Well, I
in
went
actual
on there
fact-
expecting to be, so it's like I went on there expecting the absolute worst.
Yeah.
I went, okay, I'm gonna basically, in terms of abuse.
Your life was threatened many times.
Well, I mean, to be
That's-
honest, I really don't take that seriously. I mean, maybe if I was in front of them, they'd actually want to decapitate me. But the fact is, you have to track me down, get on a plane, fly over here, rent a car, and it's just, and then wait in the bushes, and it's just, such a chore. You might as well just get over it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, really. Well, there's large groups of people waging war of words, which is a hell of a lot more sense than waging actual war with weapons, is what we've done in the past.
Yeah, because you can't. Well, you can
No,
abuse
but-
somebody. You might be able to. In an extreme case, you might be able to talk somebody into suicide. But frankly, it's a lot more effective if you can shoot them. It's do you know what I mean? It's a way of.
If you're intending to,
If you were intending
It's highly
to want to do
unlikely
something
you
like
would-
that, I mean, you can seriously affect somebody's outlook and mental state. I mean, especially peer pressure has a profound and subtle effect on people's behavior. I try and make sure that neither good nor bad feedback affects what I do so much. That's why I really do try and do that.
I think that's excellent that you try and remain insulated from the opinions of other people. And
I mean,
just
I don't
say
even-
it the way you see it.
It's not as though I don't care that people are getting something out of these videos, but I don't read comments anymore. Or hardly ever.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Some
I
of the
don't want it
best
to affect the way I
artists-
do this stuff.
Some of the best artists are like that.
Well,
I
it's a
remember
lovely
John Lennon.
analogy that you're
John
giving me.
Lennon was asked, whether he listens to much other music, and he says, "No, I don't listen to other music." He said, "I just create music." He said, "Painters don't spend all their time in art galleries. They get out into their studio and they paint."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's worth spending some time and finding out how the ground is laying, but you don't spend all being an observer. You're a participant, and that's what you are. You actually participate in the process of society and being alive. You don't just sit there and look at it from the outside.
Well, I do look at lectures. I do like to research things that I think are interesting.
Oh yeah.
But in terms of monitoring the types of feedback I get, I don't do it that much, because I have seen. I remember looking at some channels that people have been on the internet for years. I saw some of their earlier videos, and they were interesting because they were just themselves. And then when the channel gets bigger and you get more and more and more feedback, you get flooded by it, and you end up taking on this kind of persona that feels really
you feel like
phony.
you have a reputation
and
to keep up.
And it just ends up making what you do kind of boring.
Yeah, predictable.
And that really sucks.
Mm.
And so learning from other people's mistakes, I just don't want to do it.
Well,
And I'm not even saying that it's a mistake. It's just a choice, you know.
What happens is you start a process going, and then other people criticize it, and other people basically support you, and then this argument takes place on your channel, and you're off doing something else.
Well, that's basically how it goes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean...
And I want to set up the system for people to be able to do that, and I'm glad that they do that. What are you doing with the flashlight?
I don't know.
Oh.
Playing.
You know, if you put it inside your mouth, if you didn't have any hair on your... I wonder if you could see through your cheek. A little bit. Yeah, I can see through a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to put it up my nose.
I like these conversations, you know?
You know what?
What?
You should turn the whole thing upside down and make it look like we've done the whole thing hanging from the ceiling.
Well, your hair would have to be spiked up, you know? Like...
Alright.
Okay, now start. Right. Okay. I wanted to go... We were like in the middle of a good conversation. I wanted to grab the camera and we sort of went off on a completely different conversation, but it was still good.
Yeah.
We'll continue the discussion about the definition of life.
Well, the definition. One of the things that I wanted to just say, though, is with the definition of life was what I thought was kind of a revelation for me, anyway, was the idea that there are different kinds of life that would then necessitate different kinds of definitions, and therefore it may be a wild goose chase to look for one definition that defines life. And it is all-encompassing and yet restricts it and differentiates it from non-life, whereas there may be this gradual progression from non-life to life, going through different kinds of stages, possibly discrete stages of what we now call alive. And as an example, you have plants and you have animals.
And you have fire.
And you have
which
fire.
Which is basically... It's not alive, but it basically fits most criterias of what would be alive, what would be considered alive.
And then you have other processes like rivers.
Yeah,
that continuously move and have in a way they grind out their own paths in the earth, and they're constantly being fed.
I mean,
by
if you were to look at a super speeded up video of a river system, it would pulsate, bigger and smaller.
Yeah,
it would move drastically, like a snake would wriggle. I mean, it would appear to our brains, if it was super speeded up, to be alive.
Yeah, it would have a direction. It would look like maybe it looked like it had a purpose. Mm-hmm. Because it wants to go to the sea.
Well, what about the reproduction factor?
Well, you know, if it's fed enough,
I mean,
it could
fire
spread
reproduces.
Out.
Fire reproduces.
You know, if you feed a river enough, it could overflow its banks and spread out into multiple rivers.
The thing about fire is that it basically consumes something and changes the chemical process, much like digestion does. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It changes it from one thing into another and moves on, consumes and spreads, gets bigger or smaller, and you know, branches of it die out. The same as a forest fire. You know.
So there's definitely a chemical reaction going on there that there isn't necessarily with a river.
Yeah.
But there's physical characteristics that may be similar to a life form in a river without the chemistry.
But then there's our primitive brains, which are used to jumping to conclusions, like you know, a river would look alive if it was super speeded up on fast motion video. Mm-hmm. But you know, with the thing we talked about earlier, with the stove pan top moving across the counter and appearing as though it was moving on its own. That's definitely not alive, but our brain goes, a poltergeist, or oh my god, it's those small things that could kind of... It's the question that the NASA scientists have to deal with when they're looking for life on other planets. Well, in order to know what we're looking for, we really do have to define the parameters of what that might be. Mm-hmm. So I saw a lecture on TED Talks about it, and I can't remember the name, but maybe I'll put that in the link at the bottom.
Talking about the repetition of particular characters on a page, as being defining a kind of code that would
Yeah.
indicate. That
Did you
was
see
really interesting.
Did you see that one?
It was given by a Swedish guy.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
He had a fun kind of character. He seemed like he'd be cool to hang out with.
Yeah. He was a bit clumsy with his humour to start.
He was a
with.
bit clumsy, but that's kind of like, it's a little endearing.
Yeah. in
I
a
love
way
that they
it
try to
was.
make jokes and stuff.
He's
you know.
trying to make jokes, and that was funny in itself.
Yeah, it really was, isn't it? To watch the scientists, and some of them are actually quite good at it.
Yeah. Well, there's another aspect too.
Because they give so many talks and stuff, so they get
Yeah,
to try out new material,
TED
right?
Talks are just brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's another one called Pop Tech, which is quite interesting. Anyway, that's beside the point. The point that I wanted to make is that it was originally made by John Smart, who's a futurist.
John Smart, great
Yeah.
last name.
He is too.
I bet he sells a lot of books with that last name.
I don't know. He hasn't written all that many, but he's written lots of articles, and he's got a site called Acceleration Watch, which is brilliant. And anyway, and he talks a mile a minute, and he's really good. And he just concept after concept, and he's broken a lot of new ground, definitely for me anyway. But what he was saying is that because, like, for instance, computational speeds on computers are like millions of times faster than brain speeds. When
In some areas.
in
yeah.
some areas, and once you get up to the the informational throughput of the human brain, it will be processing information a hell of a lot faster. And we kind of think that, well, the computers are going to sort of look at us like dogs, like we look at dogs. But he said that in actual fact, it would be much more like the computers are going to look at us like plants. They're going to be acting so fast that they're going to be able to do so much in the time it just takes us to sort of blink. I have a tendency to think, and this I think is something that so many futurists and computer people overlook, and they equate computation with consciousness. And it seems to me that the basis of consciousness is not the ability to be intelligent, because you could look at many things that are considered intelligence, like calculators and stuff like that, but the ability to feel, because nobody's going to want, no entity is going to want anything unless they can feel.
Well, I mean, if you don't have an incentive to get up from bed, you're not going to do it. That's why people who are incredibly depressed just lay. They might be incredibly intelligent, but they just lay there because there's absolutely no incentive to get out of bed. And I mean, emotion, I think, comes from like Latin. Literal translation would be motion, literal motion, emotion.
Emotion, yeah.
Right, and it's absolutely true. It really is. You have
the
to
thing
have
that gets you moving. Yeah.
the thing that gets you moving. You have to want something.
Yeah.
So basically, you have to you have to come up with a computation that would mimic or even allow a computer to literally feel.
Yeah. Well, and that's the difficult thing for us to know whether it's mimicking feelings or whether it does feel. Like you could program it to do these things like a human, but it might be just a shell.
But we fuck with our programming too. You take ecstasy, you feel fucking wonderful.
Oh yeah, but we already started out with emotions.
Okay,
But
I'm saying
how do you
can
install emotions in that thing.
But
really,
our brain
I
is a
think
chemical process, so emotions are a result of our very complex chemical process. So in order to do that, we have to work out precisely what computations that involves.
Yeah.
You know, what chemicals
And
to what
what
degree at certain
chemical- yeah.
times. We have to basically work out the chemistry of emotion, right?
But then the problem...
And then translate it into computer language.
Yeah, yeah. But then we've got a major problem, because you could have a highly intelligent computer being your servant and carrying out what you want. As soon as you give it wants of its own, desires of its own, suddenly you potentially put it in conflict with you. And because it's so much more intelligent than you, you've just signed your own death certificate.
But here's the thing, is what I was referring to earlier. Could you instill in it a profound want to take care of people? Because if you can just instill that, then the computer can anticipate on its own.
Yeah.
It can basically, you don't necessarily have to tell it to do something. It can think and basically get on with things on its own and be a hell of a lot more user-friendly and convenient. But if it was completely logical, which of course you would assume that computers would be, you'd wonder if it could see through it.
Yeah,
but that's only if you gave the computer a desire for self-preservation. Because if you instilled it in the computer the desire for selfishness, then it wouldn't necessarily... Basically, you can give it want, and the computer's only want is to serve you. Then that would be a sense of purpose for it. But if you gave it a sense of intrinsic value in and of itself and self desire to self-sustain, that's when you'd be in trouble.
Well, I think by giving it a want, you would have provided it with its own understanding of its self-worth.
Okay,
Because the fact that it wants, or that it enjoys, or that it likes, or that all these things have value to the thing that's feeling it, because that's where value comes from. It comes from feelings. Therefore, if it was highly intelligent and it saw you as something that it needed to be nice to before it could feel happy, and therefore it was cooperating with you, it would suddenly realize that, hey, this human is getting in the way of me being happy. I have to make this human happy in order to feel okay. I'll just reprogram myself so that I can feel happy without catering to this human.
Or else it would want to keep you in a perpetual drugged up state. Or else the computer would desire to keep you in a perpetual state of ecstasy, which, you know, in a way could be pretty good.
Then, like, that's not particularly what we want, is it?
Well, speak for yourself.
Well, it's
I mean,
like killing us in a nice way.
Well, I don't mean being like in a drugged up, like, bleh state where you're just... I mean sustainable happiness.
Well, all it's doing then is saying, look, I really don't want to deal with you. Here, take these drugs. Okay, I'm on my own now. I don't have to carry this extra emotional weight. You know? I don't have to consider this all the time. I already have value because I have my own feelings. And I think that's where the value comes from.
I think you're right about that.
And consequently, if you give them their feelings, they already have
They
already want to survive if their feelings are of any importance. If they
feel a need to take care of you, then they feel they need to survive on their own.
Yeah, if they can experience enjoyment, that's reason enough to want to survive.
Yes. Right. And if... Oh, damn it, I forgot what I was going to say.
If you threaten them with, like, pulling the plug, or saying...
But here's the suicide bomber saying...
They'll immediately kill you because you're a threat to them.
Not necessarily, but alright, suicide bombers, okay? Suicide bombers blow themselves up because they think it's going to make Allah happy for the greater glory of Allah, right?
Yeah.
If basically you're going to say, look, I'm going to turn you off, but it's going to make me so happy, the computer might say, yes, turn me off then.
Well, if it's been programmed to do that, but as long as it doesn't have feelings of its own, because that would put it itself in conflict with you.
Well, alright, suicide bombers, they have feelings, presumably.
Yeah. Well, they're being totally selfish.
Well, wouldn't the computer then be totally selfish? Because it's saying...
Oh, well, if you can make it believe that it's going to end up being happier when it's turned off, because that's what the suicide bomber is thinking. When I die, I'm going to be happier in heaven. But if you say, how can you be happier when you're turned off? The computer will immediately see through that and go, yeah, well, right, pull the other leg, it's got bells on.
Well, I mean, not necessarily, because, like, I mean, the thing is that, alright, I mean, in my personal relationships, right, I mean...
With computers?
No.
Oh.
I don't have a personal relationship with computers. I'm just on my computer an awful lot. But I've basically, you know, I sacrificed my potential happiness because I knew that it would make somebody else happy. Mm-hmm.
And I don't have control over that programming in your mind.
What do you mean I don't have control over it? I made a conscious decision to do that.
Yeah, because you know that that's the best way to make you happy.
But I spent I spent last year being fucking miserable.
Because why?
You know why.
Oh, yeah, but you are already programmed to do that. You can't get around that. In a way, you can get kind of around that by taking more antidepressants.
That's what I have been doing.
Yeah. So you've been doing what the computer would do. You're using your intelligence to use a tool to get round your original programming.
But let me put it this way, like, I sacrificed my happiness for the potential happiness of somebody else, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I didn't get any benefit from that. It made me fucking miserable. And I didn't get to see the other person basically enjoying themselves.
No.
I didn't have any contact with them.
No.
You know, so that is not something that ended up making me happier. Only in the sense that I knew that if I didn't do that, that they
really
would
shitty
be
about
that they
yourself,
would not be as happy, and therefore them not being as happy would make me less happy.
Well, also that shows to how connected
So maybe
we are.
I am
as
actually
social.
being selfish.
Ultimately, yeah, you are.
It just ends up having an altruistic effect, possibly on somebody else.
If you are, if you are an empathetic person, which most of us are, then your happiness will, to a certain extent, depend on other people's happinesses, because you empathize with their feelings.
Yeah.
So in a way, the concept of yourself spreads out.
Yeah.
Into the people that you know and that you can relate to, and that your family and other people, right?
Well, that's one of the actual shitty things about religion, is that a lot of believers feel like they have to convert everybody else because they feel incredibly distressed by the fact that, and even to the point of being incredibly angry, to the point of even killing people because they don't agree with, or that they don't hold the same beliefs. I mean, when you get to the point where you're going to kill I mean, it might mildly piss you off that they come to different conclusions, but if you get to the point where you're going to freaking kill somebody because they don't, unbelievers or something like that, that's really...
Well, in a way, it's perfectly logical.
It is perfectly logical.
From the contamination of that religion.
See, the thing that I am confused about sometimes is the people who truly believe that if you don't believe in Jesus, you're going to go to hell, who have kids who, are not confirmed or who are not religious, I don't know how they can sleep at night, because if I truly believed that my kids were going to suffer for eternity, I would, want to capture them and sort of keep them in a room and brainwash them, get priests in, perform exorcisms on them, and the fact that they can just be okay with it is great. I'm not saying that, in a way, they are being hypocritical that they don't try and force their kids to do these things, but so on one level, it makes me very happy that they don't do those things. On another level, it makes me think that they're a bit hypocritical, that they maybe do not quite believe in what they say.
Well, I think that's a very nice thing. Like you're saying, it makes you happy. It shows that their humanity is showing through, regardless of the contamination of their religion.
Yes, and that is a very, very
It's a
comforting.
very encouraging thing.
Yeah, very encouraging, very comforting.
Because
So anyway, I'm going to turn this camera off because I only have a few minutes left on the battery. I actually started recording this because I felt like we were having a really good conversation about definition of life. Why do you have a flashlight?
Oh, here's two atoms rotating.
Do atoms do that?
Eh?
Atoms do that, do they?
A bit faster than that. They do that. This is a hydrogen molecule, as you can tell. There's just two of them. And they're sharing their double electrons, but they're moving so fast you can't see them, you see.
But I can.
No, you can see you can see the atoms, but you can't see the electrons. And they make that noise as well. If you were close enough.
You could hear them doing that?
Yeah, you could. I know all about these things. I took chemistry.